After concluding his section on the context specific nature of Indian society, Ramanujan goes on to also tell us that when societies are predominated by one kind of tendency, then you start seeing also counter movements of which he gives us examples that if Western society is context free, you will see counter movements that tend towards context sensitive nature, the situational ethics in that sense. He gives the example of Wittgenstein's notion of meaning and color, various relativisms, including our own search for native categories in anthropology, holistic movements in medicine, naturopaths who prescribe individually tailored regimes are good examples. So, once you have this context free nature itself in the Western society, you start seeing those context sensitive worldviews also coming in. They come in as counter arguments. Similarly, in India, he gives us examples of how these context free ideas come into our context sensitive world. And for him, that context anti contextual notion becomes bhakti. He says bhakti is different because it denies the very need of context. Bhakti defies all contextual structures, even pigeonholes of caste, ritual, gender, appropriate clothing and customs, stages of life, the whole system of homo hierarchicus, everything is in its place, is the target of its irony. And if one looks at very different bhakti poetry, different bhakti saints, one would get the example, one would find many examples of this. Ramanujan provides us a very good example of this, where he tells us of a poem. And let us look at the poem itself, and to make this point clearer, he says, did the breath of the mistress have breasts and long hair? Or did the master's breath wear sacred thread? Did the outcast last in line hold with his outgoing breath the stick of his tribe? What do the fools of this world know of the snares you set, O Ramanatha? As you would see in many parts of India, throughout Bhakti movement itself, the attack is towards established religions and religious practices, the orthodoxy and the exploitation of religion itself. And that's why you can see a very pinpointed attack towards it. Did the breath of the mistress have breasts and long hair, or the master's breath wear the sacred thread? So, one is talking about the morality of the Brahmin, who seems to be the upholder and the judge of morality for everyone else. The insinuation is that the master, the Brahmin might be actually visiting a mistress. So, thereby puncturing the entire moral righteousness that the Brahmin holds. And then it also brings in the outcast, last in line, hold with its outgoing breath the stick of his tribe. The so you have the same mistress being probably visited by a Brahmin as well as the outcast. So, where does the idea of touch go then? This poem that is excerpted by Ramanujan tells us of such complications of the world, and also is a very trenchant critique of the caste systems itself, also is a trenchant critique of the notion of purity itself, the notion of touch itself. So, that's why it says, and that's why the poem ends, what do the fools of the world know of the snares you set? So it tells us to let go of these kind of snares. Snares here would refer to probably the caste system, the idea of purity and pollution, and also you will see that it's a critique at that context sensitive nature, right? That context sensitive nature of the caste system, where the hierarchy is based on a specific context, that which are the ones, which are the communities we are talking about. So that's why he says that bhakti is denies the need of context itself, and therefore in bhakti tradition one would see that there is a rebellion against caste system, rebellion against the priestly intervention towards religiosity or spiritualism. And that's why you will see all these bhakti saints singing, and singing of the God or of the transcendent in very different terms. Then it comes through it comes across in religious discourses itself. So if you hear the songs or the dohas itself, or the poems written by the bhakti poets and saints, one would see a very different relationship with the transcendence. It's a very intimate one that goes against any sort of context in that way, any sort of barriers that are set up by caste or hierarchy in that way. Because what you see is that the intimacy that is invoked destroys that distance between the God and this devotee. You take Mirabai or Kabir, you will find innumerable examples of it, where they are talking about dissolution of that distance, because it's shared by, in their word, probably a context free system, which is love, that anyone, no matter whichever strata of society they are from, they can love the God. They don't need someone else's permission or intervention to reach closer to the God. And therefore, you also see a very trenchant critique of societal ills and evils in those poems and songs and dohas, because it's talking about that dissolution itself. It's talking about that very rigid hierarchical way of life itself. So therefore, what Ramanujan tries to impress upon us is that always the dominant will be complicated also by the counter movement. So if Western society, which is a context free society, will have these counter movements which will talk about context sensitive worldviews. Vice versa for us, because we are a predominantly context sensitive society, we will have movements like bhakti which will urge for a context free living. And then he says that something that modernity does is to bring these systems very close to each other. And you will see that modernization, he says, as a movement in India, is the movement from context sensitive to context free in all realms. So you will, his example is Gandhi's watch, which replaces almanac. Yet Gandhi quoted Emerson that consistency was the hobgoblin of foolish minds. Print replaced palm leaf manuscripts, making it possible for an open egalitarian access to knowledge irrespective of caste. The Indian constitution made the context of birth, religion, sex, creed irrelevant, overthrowing Manu, though the battle is joined again and again. The new preferred names give no clue of birthplace, father's name, caste, subcaste, sect, all, as all traditionals name did. He gives an example in Kerala college roster. He found 3 Joseph Stalins, 1 Karl Marx. I also have heard of a Andhra named Bobby Winston Churchill. So what he says is that modernity, through its institutions, brings about this change from context sensitive towards context free. So, in a way, we are moving towards, much towards the Western ways of living and thinking. And one can see that like ragas are available at any point of time in the day. You don't need to hear it at only a specific time itself. You have like institutions of, let's say, railways, institutions of modernity like constitution, democracy have given us systems which are context free. Constitution allows everyone to be equal. Democracy allows everyone to have a vote, exercise their right. In front of the law, everyone is equal. So these systems try to take out the context from these specific context itself, right? So there is no so the universal is applied here, that everyone above 18 is eligible to vote. Everyone in front of law, everyone is equal. It does irrespective of their gender, caste, creed, ethnicity, region, whatever they may be. So one starts seeing how modernity or institutions of modernity are pushing for a system that is context free. But also what happens with these kinds of context free systems coming into a context sensitive system is that you start having certain blendings and alignments or realignments that happen. So one great example will be when a new electronic device comes to the house, one usually does puja to it. Or before a scientific experiment, you will have you will think of an auspicious time to start with. Or you probably, even though you can move at any point of time now, given the the ease of movement, you will still look at Rahu Kalam and think about when to move around. And he tells us of multiple of those kinds of examples. Even though Gandhi's watch signals a movement from the almanac, you still consult the almanac for very important events of your life, such as marriage, such as going for a job interview, let's say. So Indians have tried to amalgamate many of these heterogeneous practices now. And he tells us also of this. New ways of thought and behavior do not replace but live along with older religious ways. Computer and typewriters receive Ayudha Puja, worship of weapons, what used to be actually done for weapons one time. The modern, thus, the context free becomes one more context, though it is not easy to contain this. That what happens is that now you start seeing a juxtaposition of it. It's not as if the religious completely goes away thanks to modernization, as I was giving through the examples that I was talking about, that you see that multiple such examples live. One of the exercises that I do in class when we read this essay is to ask students to think about these inhabitations of context free and context sensitive in our today's world itself. So you will and students usually come up with excellent examples, and one kind of has normalized this conditions itself in Indian way of living, and then they don't just restrict themselves to this like typewriters and computers receiving Ayudha Puja, as many other examples that I quoted. They go beyond it also and start thinking, and probably people who are taking this course can also start thinking, and that can be thought of as a take home kind of thought exercise, that you think in which ways this modernization works in our own houses itself, right? Starting from our mornings itself, how does the context free and the context sensitive work in our day to day life, be it listening to the bhajans in the morning itself. While doing puja, you probably put it on, or people listening to Bhagavatam from their iPads, or having a darshan of Tirupati or religious festival through their televisions, probably miles away, in a different time zone itself, from the time zone that the worship is going on. One can think about the juxtaposition of context free and context sensitive in multiple ways in India itself, and that brings us to this question of heterogeneity of Indian living. And therefore, this essay then gives us a very good pointer to think about texts that we have read before and texts that we will read after this, because I would like to believe this idea of the context free and context sensitive is very profitable to understand much of Indian writing in English, especially because it thinks about the category of the Indian itself, right? So, if you think about, for example, the novel genre itself, right? What happens to it thanks to modernity? It comes here, or genres like autobiography in India, what happens to them? Do they come as context free genres itself? And genres, some genres are more portable than other genres. They travel very easily. Novel happens to be one of them. Does it come from a very context? Does it come as a context-free genre, or does it? What happens to when it comes to interaction with a context-sensitive society like India itself? So that may be very instructive. What happens to Bankim's interventions when we look at this juxtaposition of context free and context sensitive models itself, or discourses themselves? And it will be profitable to think about Indian poetry itself when we come to read. And then I'll be invoking again Ramanujan there, because Ramanujan then gives us that kind of a prism to understand the various negotiations that are undergoing because thanks to modernization. What happens to the indigenous context sensitive discourses, worldviews, and knowledge systems when they interact with institutions of modernity, when they interact with time, for example. And then one can profitably think about space-time dialectic itself. In Rajmohan's wife, that what happens to time there? Are we talking about time in a very context-free way, in the linear model that novel brings in, that time is supposed to be empty and homogeneous, as Benedict Anderson would think about, which is very instrumental for the creation of the novel itself in his imagined community, in the creation of imagined communities? Or how does Bankim think about it? Those questions are very pertinent in themselves, and they provide us very good, very rich and layered understanding of Indian writing in English. it also gives us a good way to think about the question of the Indian itself, right? The easy answer is that Indian brings these two systems together. As I said, it's just it's an easy answer. The difficult one will be to unpack what we have uh, probably thought of as natural and normal about the cohabitation of these two systems itself, because they happen so regularly and every day that like we have probably not thought that they are such important interventions that have happened because of the cohabitation of two of these frames. And that might be profitable because that will give us an insight into the workings of Indian writing in English and various expressions of it. But to go back to one of the questions that we had thought about, and we are talking about the idea of the citation here itself and the nature of the essay as an informal essay. I am coming back to the first part of it. So again, this is again there are no answers to it, and probably people can think about it later. That what do quotations do here, right? Ramanujan brings in quotations to support his point of view, brings quotations to argue, provoke readers that let's look at these various observations about India and these various observations from India. In that way, he is able to create a dialectic. Uh, is this epigraph an ironical avowal that like is he trying to rob the audience of their conviction, or is it that this essay is actually provoking us to think about more about these kinds of assertion that like is there a resolution to this question mark? We need to think more probably, and in that way is it an informal essay because he actually writes in a very formal way. He mobilizes so many scholars. He incorporates scholarship across ages, across the world to think about it. So it has all the properties of an essay where he is provoking his readers to think about and think through. But informality, is it used in an ironic way, or is it informal because it asks us to participate in a conversational dialectic way? Probably the way that he ends with a parable about Buddha, where Buddha is also asking his students, asking his followers, uh, asking people who are coming to him for knowledge and wisdom or solutions in life. Buddha asks them questions, right? So Buddha also gives you many parables. So the essay ends without a resolution in that sense. The essay also tells us about the existence of both the systems. He says that Buddha, who talked about a context free on one hand, also gave us this parable where he said once a man was drowning in a sudden flood. Just as he was about to drown, he found a raft, he clung to it, he carried him to safely to dry land, and he was so grateful that he carried it on his back for the rest of his life. Such was Buddha's ironic comment on context free systems, is by giving us various versions, by mobilizing and putting them here in this essay. Obviously, he is not looking for resolution, he is looking for people to think along with him, think through this essay. And that's probably where the informality is. So, in that sense, it's not actually an informal essay, but it's an invitation in that sense to think with Ramanujan.